letting you know it's confession time before we actually go anywhere. The drinks trolley. This is our David Jacobs drinks trolley. What is our drink of the day, please, which we've taken?
I think a nice cold lager would be delicious.
Which cold lager?
Well, I quite like a Budvar. So not Budweiser.
The one in the box.
A Czech.
Nice.
Czech
it is.
lager Budvar.
That's our drink of the day. Thank you very much indeed. Always drink responsibly.
Obviously.
Today's confession, which feels quite timely actually, comes from Basil FT. Thank you, Basil FT. Father Simon and the Sometimes Forgiving Collective. This is our third visit to this establishment this week. My story goes back to nearly 50 years to the early days of autumn 1973. I was a sixth form pupil at St Custard School.
Obviously.
And can I just say, basically, people always tell us the name of the school, so I always change it.
Of course.
In case everyone's thinking, what is this place? And can I send my kids there? And making the leap from lower sixth to upper sixth. Ask your parents. An important time for our year as we were to become the big boys of the school. As part of our transition to the senior year, there came certain decisions and certain new responsibilities. One of the most important events, maybe the most important, was the election of the new head boy of the school. The election process was, let us say, somewhat low-tech. Simple rules in those days. Are you listening? 1922 committee. That's me adding that in. Right. Simple rules in those days. Over a period of a day and a bit vague, a box would be placed in the deputy headmaster's study. All members of our year were instructed to place their vote on a piece of paper in the box. You've got a day and a bit. Off you go. Now, this position was far from a symbolic one, this idea of the head boy. The head boy, the elected individual, was co-opted onto a group of powerful individuals comprising school governors and teachers. One of the responsibilities of this group was the allocation of funds for school spending. An important role. The election was the main topic of interest and chatter for quite a while. What became clear was that we were, it would seem, looking at a two-horse race. This does sound
oh dear.
Leading candidate A, let us call him Grabber, was favoured by what one might call the less academic faction. Leading candidate B, let us call him Peason, was favoured by the, I'm being kind here, academic body of pupils.
Okay, yeah.
Previous head boys were not allowed to stand on the grounds that, one, they'd left, and two, we'd look stupid. The selection was, to many of us, critical. We were talking new sports equipment and money for days out against new library books and lab testing equipment.
Oh, wow.
In addition, other topics such as permissible school uniform, length of hair, and so on. These were all decided with involvement from the new head boy. This was an important office. Finally, after a week of pre-election fever, the time for the voting arrived. The deputy headmaster was a feared individual and should remain nameless. He did, however, have a nickname, which was Porky. More of this in a moment. After voting had been open for a while, I and a fellow conspirator, let's call him John, were beside ourselves, wondering how the voting was going. Our guy had to win, surely. Field trips, museum trips, new cricket gear were all tantalizingly close. Was there anything we could do to steer the result towards our chosen candidate? Well, the deputy head was in his office all the time, except one significant time during lunchtime. The aforementioned nickname now comes into play. Porky enjoyed a good lunch. Come lunchtime, and Porky's office was predictably empty. Employing the one of us do the dirty deed, the other one do the lockout approach. I've never heard of that. Anyway, we decided to check the voting so far. It was not good news. It seemed like the voting was favouring the academics. New library books and lab testing equipment beckoned. What could we do? It was still lunchtime and Porky would still be on his seconds or maybe thirds. So we retreated and found some paper and a pen. We created a number of false votes. 20 or 30 might do it. A variety of handwriting styles were attempted. Back to Porky's office, where our dodgy votes were duly stuffed in the box. Later in the day, the votes were counted. The actual number of votes were not announced. It was announced, however, a very close contest. And then, to our delight, it was pronounced that our man Grabber had won and was duly elected the new head boy. Peason had lost, ha-ha. We cannot know for certain, but almost certainly our surreptitious involvement had swung the result in our favour. I realise now that rigging an election is not to be encouraged. No one should ever get involved in this kind of activity.
No.
Because it would bring the country and our school into disrepute.
It would.
Father Simon, I seek forgiveness, not from our deputy head, but from the innocent peasant who perhaps should have been elected head boy, but never was, much to his doubtless great discussions and much disappointment. Basil FT, thank you very much indeed for that. It's a shocking story. The Electoral Reform Society will be in touch. They've rigged an election, Sister Susie.
Yeah, they really have at Basil. And, you say Peason should have been selected. Well, I think it should have 100% definitely should have been selected. If you put 30 votes in for the other person and it was a close call, I definitely think Peason should have been head boy. And it's just cheating, really, isn't it? So I just can't forgive you.
No. Peason might be a broken man still because he lost that election.
Yeah.
Brother from another country.
Unlikely. I'm going to say forgiven. Really, I mean, the system was wrong, really, wasn't it? I mean, if it's that easy to rig the election, then asking for trouble. It reminds me of my own very brief clash with student politics where I ran under the Whoops Vicar Where's My Balloon party and came fourth. Really? And the person who came first is currently an MP. Yes, dodged a bullet there, I think. So I am going to forgive because someone should have been watching the box, shouldn't they? They clearly weren't.